Nancy Weston is a former high school teacher and combines her love for quilting and her passion for social justice through her keynote presentations. Today, she has several that she does, but today we're hearing about In Memory of Sandy Hook, Quilters and Graphic Artists Address Gun Violence.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. So you can all hear me okay, and you can see the slides. But this presentation grows out of, as Trish said, my interest in quilting, which I've been doing actually since I was 9 years old. My grandmother taught me to quilt on a treadle machine. And then I got very involved in the gun violence prevention movement after Sandy Hook, because I lived in Danbury, Connecticut, right next. Sandy Hook was 4 miles away. So, yeah, that really motivated me. I was already doing some social justice work, but then I really became what I call a social justice warrior at that point. So, let's see if this works. Okay, so this was in 2012 when Sandy Hook happened, and as I said, I was living only a few miles away, and the massacre of 20 children and 6 adults affected me really deeply and was the motivating force for me to be involved in the gun violence movement prevention. At that time, my Universalist Unitarian church that I belonged to there in Danbury traveled with a full bus to a rally in Hartford, and it drew 5,000 people advocating for better gun control laws. So each year I try to mark the anniversary of Sandy Hook with something, and a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, I created this, and I've shown it a couple of times to different organizations to commemorate Sandy Hook. So you're going to be seeing slides that represent how artists, both textile artists who do quilting and artists that use drawing tools to call attention to gun violence in our country. So this graphic, and some of these things are graphics, some are comics, and some are quilts. This one uses flag imagery to juxtapose gun rights, Second Amendment, against the right to life in the Declaration of Independence. So notice that this flag is comprised of bullets, if you look closely. And so throughout this presentation, I'll move freely between quilts, satirical comics, and other graphics. So gun violence has become an American epidemic. This Rolling Stone cover illustrates that for the period of time from 2004 to 2013 on American soil, there was 1 American death by terrorism. That's the little black bomb in the corner. For every over 1,000 deaths by gun. Those are all of the red. And those are guns. You can't really see this on the slide that clearly, but those are little guns. And the last 2 decades have been even worse since assault weapon ban expired in 2004. And we have not been successful in repassing it. Satirical comic artists often use recognizable graphic memes to make a point. For example, in this case, the Energizer Bunny. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. It just keeps going and going. How many places are left where Americans can actually feel safe from gun violence? You can see it's a roulette wheel in the top left, and it's a cross-off list in the bottom right. And there are no places anymore for safety. Navigating the game of life in America. These board moves are actual recent events. Open the wrong car door, get shot. Game over. Ring the wrong doorbell, game over. Turn in the wrong driveway, game over. So, mystery by choice. No matter what the arguments are, it comes down to this, it's the guns. The boxes on the lower left comic say people with mental health problems, kids playing violent video games, and assault rifles available everywhere for everyone. And you can see that in the other countries like Japan, France, UK, Germany, Australia, they have all those same problems. The only one for the USA is the last box checked prevalence of guns. And in the top left-hand corner, one They're surrounded by a pile of guns. And the one person is saying, I wonder why there's been so much gun violence. And the other one, oh, it's really hard to say. So what these quilters are that you're going to see, and even maybe by extension you could call the comic artists that too, but definitely the textile artists, they're craftivists, which is a neologism made up by someone who channels their anger at injustice and their passion for a better world into creative objects and activities. So it's usually been used for textile arts, but I like to expand it to the graphic arts as well, which is why I have so many different comics. Sean Kimber, who was a quilter and a math professor at Lafayette College, no longer there, but she's also a social activist, and she often used social activist lessons in her classroom when she was teaching math. And she said, these are not your grandmother's quilts. I really wanted to challenge the notion that quilts are sacred and made by saintly grandmothers. So as you look at these different graphics and quilts, think about how they illustrate the ongoing issue of gun violence in our country, because obviously the people who create these comics and these textile arts, they want to call attention to this as an issue. This is a very different, I have another presentation I do called Quilts of Social Protest, Not Your Ordinary Bed Cover. And these are not your ordinary, the quilts are not your ordinary bed cover. They're wall hangings and they're designed to make a statement. Most of my quilt photos came from two exhibits that were at the Lowell, up in Massachusetts, Lowell, Massachusetts. They have the New England Quilt Museum there, and they've done a lot of different presentations on social justice issues. And the first one I went to was Threads of Resistance, which was a juried exhibition created to protest the Trump administration's actions and policies, and this was in 2017. And then in 2018, they did Guns, Loaded, Conversations. And the title of both of them point out something that I find really interesting in this kind of presentation of the objects that are being presented in this, is that there's often double meanings. Comic artists and quilt artists who name their quilts or their exhibits often use puns and double meanings to make their points. And so as we look at the different quilts, you can think about the really varied approaches that people have taken. And again, they're wall art rather than bed quilts. So the first one, this is not normal. And it says this is normal, but if you look really closely, in fainter letters, you can see the word not. And it's not normal to have this much death by guns. Our country has it. No other civilized country has it. So, another mass shooting. Will Congress support an assault weapons ban? And you can see it says GOP House there is going click, click, change the channel. And he's an active muter. The bottom right, the little print says, America responds to the latest mass shooting. Yawn. This quilt was created by a woman who joined Moms Demand Action, which is one of the gun violence prevention organizations, after a local youth was shot and killed at a university. And in spite of all the mass shootings, Congress refuses to act. That was her point. Our capital has become a house of guns. And I have a detail there so you can see that actually cut out of the lace are guns. There are guns stacked up on the dome of the Capitol, and they're all across the steps and the pillars. So again, sort of pay attention to how creative these people are, with the quilters are, with their different ways of expressing the same theme. Here's a different one, very different from the one you just saw. This one's very bold. Gun violence kills more people every year than any other cause of death, barring many people lost to COVID. It's now the #1 cause of death of children. This quilter asks why. And you can see in the middle this kind of a bullseye. That's a very popular motif in a lot of the quilts and comics. This one is very elaborate, very realistic looking. I did put a detail in there so you could see how densely and finely hand quilted the quilter quilted this, because you can't see it unless you're really close up to the actual quilt. But it's trying to represent that this is actually called "Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes." The justice system is unbalanced when dealing with the issue of gun control. All the rights go to the gun owners, which is symbolized by the scale on the, well, from our perspective, the left, where the bullets, and then money in the background, where politicians are strangleholded, if there's such a word, by advancing better gun prevention laws, by the fact that they get, big money from places like the NRA or organizations like the NRA. I have a good friend and neighbor. She lives in the same community I do, Barbara Schulman. She's actually Kutztown University professor emeritus. She was the head of the textile department there, and she does a lot of social justice wall art. And this is her interpretation of the gun violence plague in America. And I did also put a detail there because you can see, there's a figure there doing the pose of, maybe the lotus position or whatever in yoga, but she's dead shot. She's actually very, very creative with her use of materials. So a lot of the quilts use, and also a lot of the comics as well, use the American flag motif, as you'll see in the next couple of quilts. This quilt features the names of gun violence victims written across the stripes. And you'll note that the stars are red and on a black background, denoting blood and death. Another flag motif. And here the stars are white, but if you look closely, you'll see some are marred with red that look like blood dripping. This one was created after Sandy Hook. Is this America's heartland? Again, if we really had a heart, we would not be allowing the kind of violence by gun death that we do in this country. Similar theme. Only this one combines some gun and crime-related paraphernalia. This is a graphic, not a quilt, but it's often found in quilters' works. You'll see in subsequent quilts, you can see the dead bodies instead of stars, the outline on a pavement with chalk, and the crime scene tape. One Pulse commemorates the shooting of 99 with 49 dead at an LGBTQ nightclub in Florida, where safe space was violated in 2016. The background of this rectangle where stars would normally be seen, again, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's skulls. This one is a comic, similar imagery. Flag is upside down here. He's shot out of a gun. Another popular motif is bullet holes in the American flag. Note the double meaning of shooting stars. In the top left-hand graphic, and then in the bottom, instead of being called Old Glory, it's Old Gory. And the red stripes in the bottom right-hand corner are created from the names of gun violence victims. So the artists, especially the comic artists, use a lot of irony, symbolism, exaggeration, and analogy, and that's what catches our attention. That's what's interesting about political and satirical comics, is it makes you stop and think. And as we look at the slides of the similar themed quilts, you can pay attention to how some of these visual memes, or whatever you want to call the motifs, are used. For example, in this one, This is called American Opportunity, and I have a detail there so you can see it a little bit better, but you can see the holes in the fabric. And what this quilter did was put in over 500 burned and numbered holes representing victims, with the X's standing for the 58 people who died at that point when she made the quilt that she was aware of. And the way the stripes in the background represent, no matter what color people are, they're victims of gun violence. And then the chaotic path of all of the different holes and stars represents the chaotic paths of the crowd trying to escape the shooter. In the background of that fabric is red, the background of the gold fabric, so that you can see the sort of like the idea of blood seeping through the bullet holes. The quilter says, "It took me longer to do the burning, stitching, and numbering than it took the shooter to mow down the concert goers." This is also a quilt. The number of holes in this quilt is the number that can be shot by an assault rifle in the time it takes to read this. So some comics on the same themes. This one is like, is in the bottom left-hand corner, the speaker, whom you cannot see, is saying, "Is now a good time to discuss reasonable gun control measures?" And notice that the bubble that represents that speaker speaking is shot full of holes. Also, on the top left, that document is shot through with holes. And in the far right, it says constitutional amendment. We, the gun lobby. This is an interesting quilt. The background is a gray fabric that was created to look used and wrinkled so that it looks like an asphalt pavement. And around that is the figure of a person, death by gun. And then that, if guns made us safe, then America would be the safest country in the world. Again, irony. And you can see in the detail, blood is dripping from the barrel of the gun. So these comics also share crime imagery, but note in Red Planets in the top left the use of the double meaning. Mars is not the only red planet. And in the bottom right, this is the GOP's response. They know what's needed, more chalk. Some more quilts. A lot of the quilts really creatively use gun paraphernalia. Here the quilters have used ammo belts, bullets, and unfortunately toe tags. That's at the bottom of the left-hand quilt. Those are toe tags for corpses. Are 58 lost lives enough to create change? This quilt called Mending Gold, When Will It Be Enough? This quilter has a plain white background, but has anchored thread, gold thread, into brass casings, the total number of which signify the number of mass shootings in one American city. This quilter used empty leg Magnum shot bags to make her quilt. Empty lead Magnum shot bags. These are ammo bags that are used to hold ammunition. And, you know, it's like, they look kind of bright and colorful, not that bright, but somewhat colorful and all, you know. But, you know, it's like those ads on TV where they're telling you about the latest thing you should ask your doctor about. But they're narrating that while there's all these scenes of people having fun, you know, enjoying themselves, not worrying about anything. So, again, the contrast between the material and the message. That one's called Reclaim, Reload, and Rejoice, the perfect game. This one I really find fascinating. The numbers in this quilt represent statistics in the shooting deaths of 2 black individuals in Ohio on November 29th, 2012, at the conclusion of a 22-minute police chase, which started in downtown Cleveland. Their vehicle backfired once. 62 police cruisers involving 104 officers gave chase for 22 miles, fired 137 shots, 15 of which were point blank, total 137, and dead 2 people. And so you can see the numbers. And do you see what the background, what the white can represent? Cough, yeah, shrouded bodies and bullets, both. Okay, so Sean Kimber, I mentioned her before. She used to teach in the mathematics department at Lafayette College, and she uses that bullseye motif, which is frequent throughout this quilt. It's a very detailed quilt. Her works I actually saw in person because she had a display at Lafayette College maybe 5 years ago. And there's that one red bullseye in the upper right-hand corner. Ready, Aim, Fire uses a police target as a practice sheet as part of this quilt. That's in the upper right. And then again, the bullseye motif. This is not the time to talk about gun control. That one's the title of the quilt on the left, top left. And the bottom, again, also a quilt, believe it or not. Ma and Pa get radicalized in Oregon. Their plowshares are turned into swords. You know, the idea of taking agricultural tools and turning them into weapons. And that's what makes this next slide really interesting, I think, because there's a movement around the country called Swords into Plowshares, which is turning guns into tools and musical instruments. Now, I actually went to one of these in Philadelphia about 5 years ago, and you can see in the top right-hand corner, there's a blacksmith, and that's what he actually did, was take an assault weapon and repurpose it into a garden tool. And in the bottom right, there's a man, Pedro Reyes, a government agency in Mexico gave him over 6,000 guns that had been confiscated from criminal gangs and rendered inoperable. And so he's been turning them into electric guitars, violins, flutes, and percussion instruments. And he says art should address social issues, even if they're difficult or controversial. And of course, that's what this presentation is about. This is art. It's graphic art, textile art, and it's an uncomfortable issue. But unless we sear into our consciousness the danger of where we're going with this direction, we don't participate in the fight. This one is called A Particularly American Horror. This was after the gun rampage in Las Vegas. And again, it took 58 victims and left countless others scarred both physically and emotionally. And there's a lot of different words in that. Again, you can't see that well on the slide on the left, or the photo on the left, but I have a detail there. Again, so many different ways to represent the same theme. This one is really is so paradoxical because you have this gold thread outlining on a white background different kinds of guns, gold embroidered guns, creating a sharp contrast between the types of guns that were used during the late 1700s and the guns used today in today's mass shootings. And on the right, the irony is even stronger with the contrast of an embroidered gun on a delicate lady's handkerchief. That image on the right is actually from a project called the Tiny Pricks Project, and it was started after Trump was elected. And I'm sure you can get the double meaning of pricks. And this is some more of what they have done. This exhibit started in New York City, and then it went to different museums around the world. But look at this, again, delicate ladies, embroidered handkerchiefs, napkins, things like that. And the irony and the hypocrisy is just I think, so wonderful here. I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose voters. You know who that is. This one is I think, priceless. Until a drag queen walks into a school and beats 8 kids to death with a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, I think you're focusing on the wrong shit. And then Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, the problem is the human heart. It's not guns, it's not the weapons. Yeah. This one also, you know, in the olden days, American samplers used to be done by young women learning their needlecraft skills. And they would be doing the alphabet and numbers and little flowers and stuff like that. This one, somebody did American sampler, completely created of embroidered guns. And there's a detail there so you can see a little bit more what that looks like. It's not the colonial times anymore, either for our weapons or our art. So here's a really big difference in 2 quilts. The one, and that is a quilt, believe it or not. It's very sparse and direct. Bang, you're dead. The quilter's husband worked in the Chicago school system where many school children are victims of gun violence. So you can contrast her style with all the elaborate details in the quilt on the right, expressing that any one of us could be the next person staring at an empty chair when a loved one has been a victim of gun violence. Claire's quilt is from the viewpoint of a 4-year-old. Note that the background is dozens of children in trapunto. If you look at the detail, can you see the shrouded children in the background? Yeah. I mean, it's really, what these artists do, I think, is really, really clever. Poignant, sad, but also really clever. And then the other one is a calendar marking off. Almost 50% of American households own at least one gun. Often they're obtained by children when they're unsecured, not the children, the guns. And children are killed or injured because adult gun owners leave them where kids can find them and accidentally shoot themselves. So every other day. Now this one is actually a graphic, but I think it points out a really important thing. A promise that's increasingly hard to make for a parent. Mommy, promise me that you'll always keep me safe. I wish I could, honey. And in the background, 18 children and a teacher killed in a Texas school shooting on the news. And then the bottom one, goodbye, Dad, off to school. Goodbye, son. Please don't get shot. Please come back to me alive. Please let me hold you again, please. So gun violence causes shattered childhoods, of course, and everybody who is left after the children. So this quilt on the left, her nephew was a Sandy Hook first grader. So what she did is she cut the background into, and it's a little hard to see but you can see the lines of the radiating out from the center. The background is cut into 26 pieces, and she printed newspaper articles on fabric, and that is what the background is. The balloons of hope complete the collage. And then the one on the right is from an organization called Grandparents Against Gun Violence. And you can see how much more simple that is, but it commemorates the same message to honor those children who have perished from gun violence. All right, the next kind of section is really very interesting to me, using the crucifix image. And after Sandy Hook, the quilter here, Nancy Lemke, she expected changes in gun laws, which didn't happen. So she said, for this piece, I created the most shocking image I could think of to express my horror at school shootings and my disappointment in our government. It's based on Marc Chagall's White Crucifixion, which I put an image of there so you could see how she used that image as the vaulting point for her creation. And if you see in the lower right-hand corner of her quilt, you can see the Capitol Dome. And I don't know if that's really clear, but you know, the gun lobby is slipping politicians money. Again, also very cleverly, this crucifix is made up of 3 different guns superimposed on each other. And the background is coffins with a red dot in it to represent the blood. So that's why I have a little detail there so you can see the image of the coffins. And then on the right side the arms of the crucifix-shaped person have guns on them with the not allowed symbol crossed out through them. End gun violence. Now, comics of the same theme. Let Us Pray, NRA. And this one on the right commemorates Christchurch in New Zealand. That was 101 individuals who were killed in a mosque. And within 1 month, the New Zealand Parliament outlawed military-style semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles. And people often ask me, well, why don't we do that in this country? Well, we don't do it because we have a Second Amendment. So that comic says the way, the truth, and the life for those who believe in guns as their savior. Another one, very graphic. This is textile art making the same point. Guns are more sacred than lives. Here a child is hung on the cross of a shooter. Now, neither the child is real, nor a real person is the shooter in that picture. It's all, created textile art. So there's a lot of use of irony in a lot of the things that are presented here. On the left, there's a nativity scene in a Massachusetts church that features a list of mass shootings and their death totals in those signs above. So the goal was to show the contrast between the way of Jesus and the way of violence. After Parkland school shooting, the NRA urged people to celebrate Valentine's Day by buying guns for their loved ones, top right. And the contrast in the lower right, baby booties and the message, showing the power of the imagery. Sacrificing the lives of the young. Practically no words are needed here. You can read that for yourself, but do note that the letters in the man's t-shirt are made up of different kinds of weapons, mostly guns. In 2017, the minority leader of the Tennessee House, Representative Mike Stewart, used irony to demonstrate how ridiculous the state's gun laws were. So he offered an AK-47 for sale at a downtown lemonade stand. He actually bought the assault rifle with no background check in a parking lot, and then he proposed to sell it the same way as part of a lemonade stand, but of course, ironically. How about this one? Yeah, it's a comic, but the one in the colored photograph, that is actually a little semi-automatic that was created for children by the Springfield Armory in 2012. And you can see the comic says NRA toys for 9-year-olds, Bar Boozy and Nerf Uzi and My Little Uzi and so on. Vaulting off in that same idea, we have Charlton Heston's infamous statement about anyone trying to take his guns. Now, the child in the NRA Kids Club objects to bedtime with the same meme. You can't take my gun unless you pry it from my cold, dead fingers, or if it's past my bedtime. Guns for kids, another great idea from the American firearms industry. Obama. Can we agree to change the font on the background check form? LaPierre. If you want that font, you'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands. Again, any change, no matter how sensible, will result in the slippery slope. Now, these are really, well, when I came across these, I was like, it's unbelievable. These are actual holiday cards sent by gun-owning families. And yes, the children have guns. This one, again, another family with guns. Every time you share this, a liberal's head explodes. And then what we're up against, Trump repeals an Obama bill that makes it harder for people with mental health issues to get guns. So think about what messages these graphics convey. The visual approach is often the most successful way to jar people out of complacency because you can read a lot, but again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You see a sign that says, "Welcome to the United States of America, 0 days since a mass shooting." Yeah, how much more do you have to say? And if their faces aren't enough, picture your child's faces here. Your child's face, sorry. So graphic artists who create these political and satirical comics really convey so much with so little. So these are all schoolroom scenes, but think about what's different from them when you were a child, especially those of you who are older. Last day of school is today, bullet holes to spell the word. Geography lesson, 74 school shootings in the last 18 months. And even kindergarten, crayons. You see what some of them are? They're not all crayons. It's bullets. Now, this gubernatorial candidate for Pennsylvania in 2018 said schools should just lock their doors. Well, the fact is that the Sandy Hook school doors were locked. The AR-15 used by the shooter demolished the window in seconds. So what is next? Schools without windows? We're going to have armed concrete blocks for kids. And on the left, Republican math, basically shameless equations. The top right, the principal is saying, "Oh, hard to fathom after we gave them guns why there's a teacher shortage." I'm telling you, as a former teacher, I would have quit in a moment if it ever were required for me to have a gun. Where would Billy get the idea that it was appropriate to bring a toy gun to school? Where indeed? So think about the messages in these graphics and words. It's okay to laugh at the bottom right. It's okay to laugh because satire uses humor to reinforce a message. But that one says, "I'm trying hard to picture my teachers with guns. They were scary enough with rulers." Anybody who knows about the Catholic school. And in the top right, if you can't see the small words, it says A is for automatic, B is for Beretta, C is for Colt, and so on. Is that what we want to be teaching in our schools? Now, some of the proponents of the Second Amendment have suggested, and even some of the people who are working with schools, have suggested that children, at first they hide, then they run, then they actually attack the shooter. And so one person said, "I don't support the notion of a child hero. A child who dies saving their classmates is a victim. Let's not encourage children to jump in front of bullets. Let's encourage adults to pass gun control measures." And a sign at a rally, "Let's take a moment to honor the sacrifice of our brave school children who lay down their lives to protect our right to bear arms." And then sacrificing children at the gun altar, the comic at the bottom. "Uncle Sam, they sacrificed themselves for the American way of life." And the child asks, "Soldiers?" And then you see a graveyard. He says, "No, fourth graders." So, thoughts and prayers. Can someone explain to me why the same people who don't need to wear a mask because God will look after them also need an AR-15 because God won't? Why not just ban guns, and when people are upset about them, just send them thoughts and prayers? I don't understand why we need the Secret Service when we can protect the president with thoughts and prayers. Yeah. Let's do that. This is a recent video. I didn't want to try to show a video because sometimes it doesn't work in Keynotes, but these are screenshots from it. There's a little girl reaching for her floaty. Okay, and it says here, the #1 killer of students in the United States. And so she falls into the pool. Her mother comes out, "Please, God, save her." And here's the reaction. Thoughts and prayers. Oh, thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers are meaningless unless you act. Very powerful video. Another issue, many reasons contribute to gun violence, but responses differ when race, color, and national origin are taken into effect. And this is the flow chart about how to make decisions about what to do about mass shootings. So if the murderer was Muslim, travel bans. But no, was he Hispanic? Then build a wall. No, was he black? More cops and more prisons. Was the murderer white? Yes, thoughts and prayers. The elephants are saying to each other, hopefully this victory parade remains safe from voters. So listening to reason, if you say that a car, a knife, and a hammer are as lethal as an AR-15, then why do you need an AR-15 to protect yourself when you already have a car, a knife, and a hammer? Guns don't kill people, bullets do. So I recommend we allow gun dealers to sell guns to their heart's content and that we ban ammunition. That way, those who need guns to feel safe can feel safer and everyone else can be safer. So what about rights? Okay. The Second Amendment right is weighed against other rights like life and health care, which is the top right-hand comic, health care being a privilege. Guns ownership is a right. So who is to define rights? This one I think is so clever. After the Parkland shooting, the students organized into March for Our Lives, and one of the things they did was they printed these and they asked students to wear these to school. Problem, lawmaker inaction and money. And so those are tickets, and that's because Marco Rubio had received over $3 million from the NRA, and when the kids did the calculation, it came out to $1.05 per student. So they asked the students to wear those tags to school on March 24th that year to protest politicians who accept blood money. Very clever. Problem, defining mental illness. I don't know if you can see it, but they're saying America's mental health crisis, and they're saying more guns, high-capacity magazines, no universal background checks, extra thoughts and prayers, no assault on gun ban. So that's the mental health crisis. It's actually of the politicians. It's not of the shooters. And then in the bottom right comic, I'm convinced that all mass shootings are related to mental illness. And the woman says, yeah, because our gun culture is nuts. When we talk about school shootings, we have to consider the mental health factor. Concerning shooters or our lawmakers? Insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And of course, in this one, you have workers shoveling into a furnace. This isn't working against gun violence, and of course, it's all thoughts and prayers being thrown into the fire. This isn't working. Let's keep feeding it the exact same thing. This is one of my favorites, only because I'm very also involved in book banning issues. So the teacher in the top right, of course, bloody kids dead from gun violence, and there's the nude image of Michelangelo, Michelangelo's David, and she's asking the kids, look away from Michelangelo's statue, okay? Not the kids who have been murdered. And then down in the bottom, the representation of the GOP saying, stop, let me inspect that book. Critical race theory. It would be nice if people got as outraged by school shooting as they do about critical race theory, top left, bottom right. At least we saved them from drag shows and critical race theory. The speaker says, I'm worried that children are being exposed to critical race theory, but if you look in the windows, you see asbestos, lead, and active shooting drill, terrifying the students. And then the bottom right, good news, sir, nobody was teaching critical race theory. So if you look closely at the virus particles on the left, the spikes of the virus are guns. Multiple choice question, which one does Texas think should be strictly regulated? Yeah, you know the answer to that. And then imagine how things would be different if Republicans worked as hard to keep guns out of schools as they're working to keep masks out of schools. More about the virus. There's a lot of comics that came out of COVID as compared to gun violence. And this gun buyer is saying, yeah, when them COVIDs come from me, I want to be ready. And the bottom right, I'm scared that a virus could kill tens of thousands if it gets out there without any government oversight. And of course, he's probably selling guns without a background check. Immigration and gender issues. Guns unlimited. And then they go, oh my God, they're pouring in, about the immigrants instead of the guns. I'm waiting for the church to be as outraged about gun violence as much as we seem to be about who pees in which Target bathroom. Fallacious reasoning. This speaker says, well, criminals don't obey stop signs, therefore we don't need stop signs. And you know, even your hairdresser is required to have training and regulations and licenses and things like that. At the very least, if we could treat guns and gun owners as we do cars, drivers, and car seats. Problem, ignoring the experts. So in 2018, the NRA told anti-gun doctors to stay in their lane. Why can't they just stay in their lane? After research papers about firearm injuries and deaths was published in medical journals, and about 20 physicians actually showed up in Harrisburg of one of the rallies that I went to with signs. It was a gun violence rally with signs saying, I'm a doctor and this is my lane. Another expert being ignored, hunters, and in my band, my guitar player is a hunter. He has weapons, rifles. He takes deer. He has some for his family. He contributes to the deer food bank in Pennsylvania for people who need more protein in their diet. And he does not believe, as most hunters do. Over 90% of hunters believe that there should be a ban on assault weapons. Nobody needs to kill a deer with an assault weapon, no matter what those people who say they want their assault weapons for. This is a great one in the upper left-hand corner. 75% of teachers oppose being armed. However, 45% of the general public wants to have armed teachers. And this comic says, in 1970, cars were a death trap for children, and schools were safe. Now we have the 2020s, child-safe cars, but schools are death traps, yeah. And then locked and loaded, Mrs. Nedbetter is ready to teach some freaking English. Yeah, okay. And I like this statement that's made. Teachers, we must as a nation and profession refuse to be armed. This is not professional development that we're willing to participate in. This one is great. The Constitution, you see a pregnant woman here, the Supreme Court, and one of them is wearing a Handmaid's Tale outfit. The Constitution still protects your right to pray that your uncle's baby we're forcing you to birth won't be shot in a taxpayer-funded religious school by a MAGA-loving white nationalist off his meds who we just gave the right to carry a concealed gun in New York City. Yeah. Problem defining rights, as I mentioned before. The Texan in the lower left, we believe in a woman's right to choose. Glock or Smith & Wesson. And then the gun head is saying to the elephant, who's stop abortion, protect life, all of that, can you direct me to the nearest mall, place of worship, school, or LGBTQ hangout? This is great too. The gun is saying, really? That's weird. I have lots of rights. Let's rename school as uterus so that maybe Republican lawmakers will want to do something about the children dying inside them. And this is priceless. The police is coming up, law enforcement coming up on a couple in a car, and she says to her husband, partner, whatever, relax, I hid the contraceptive pills in the gun. Problem, myths of protection. So Somebody made the point, well, these are the guns I use to keep my home and way of life safe: caulking gun, hot glue gun, and staple gun. And the same idea in the lower right. Another incident averted, thank God for the good guy with the staple gun. And of course, we have that whole myth about the Old West, you know? Shoot first, ask questions later, get out on the street, have a shootout, all that kind of stuff, be a hero. And you can see it's a little tiny guy with a big gun, and his image is now that he's big and strong. Problem, what's a well-regulated militia? Well, pick the one, either the Minuteman or the hundreds of rounds per minute man. These comics are really so clever and make the case so well. And then choice of weapon as alluded to in the Second Amendment as it's ratified in 1791, and then weapon of choice that we uphold the Second Amendment with. A well-heeled gun lobby being necessary to the security of a cowardly Congress. The right of American jihadist terrorists to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Again, irony. Note the double meaning of right to carry. And a lot of comic artists rely on literary and classical allusions. This one is from Mary Shelley's Gothic novel to make their points, Uncle Sam. But I created you the Second Amendment, and it's turned into a monster. Second Amendment scoreboard. Tyrants overthrown, 0. Co-workers, students, spouses, store clerks, etc. killed, 38,000 a year. I believe it's now up to 42. Problem, catastrophic reasoning and fallacy. Keep your eyes peeled out for those Democrats. They're trying to come and get your guns. It's top right. Bottom right, the slippery slope. Mass shootings. But it's not the slippery slope. We're not having the same meaning as what's actually happening. Gun organizations such as the NRA, another problem. The woman at the desk is saying, this is so funny, the NRA National Convention, check your guns at the door. May I pry your weapons from your cold, dead hands? This is where the rhetoric meets the road. And then the bottom right, you can have your congressman when you pry him from my cold, dead fingers, says the NRA arm. Here, NRA is spelled out with the bodies of dead school children in this comic. And then in the bottom left, the NRA. That's actually another deranged gunman attempting to invade U.S. schools by bringing guns in to the teachers. Next problem, defining checks. Okay, as you can see, the congressperson is being handed checks, as in money. Condolences to the victims, prayers for the loved ones, sympathies for survivor, check, check, check. And in the bottom left, Congress, if given a background check, shows it has a horrendous record. Again, congressional inaction. We don't have a gun crisis, we have a mental health crisis. But I'm not going to do anything about either of them. I just wanted to clarify. Lower right. Note the pun on hired gun in the lower right-hand corner. Hired gun. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims, but our hearts and hands are with the gun industry. Congress, head in the sand. And note the play on words with trigger finger in the comic on the left versus not lifting a finger. And then let bygones be bygones. Our hearts go out to the victims and our hands go out to the NRA. Little girl says, I want that one, action and courage as it floats away. Thoughts and prayers? No. And then this one's clever. Time for universal backbone checks for Congress. Problem, protecting the wrong ideas and the wrong people. How to console a grieving politician. That's okay, you're safe. NRA. And boo-hoo, it's the on the humanity. Oh, thoughts and prayers. And they're there. Coming out of the gun is money. Tom Repash here actually gave me this one. It's out in front of the UN building. What are people doing about the issue? So this is the last piece in my presentation, and what are people actually doing? And there's craftivists, there's students, there's youth, mourners, vigils, marches, all these kinds of things. And so what are some of the alternatives? Please listen. Here are some solutions. These are both quilts. Then we have collaborative initiatives, Grandparents for Gun Safety and Grandparents Against Guns, and they make quilts. And also Mother's Dream Quilt, created by people who hope that their children will grow up and not be killed. There's a series of quilts being made by organizations like Mothers for Quilting, or Quilters Mothers, and this is actually the Roxbury Peace Quilt. And every year, Roxbury, Massachusetts has ever since I think when they start this year was the 25th, coming up on the 25th, or no, 29th. I'm sorry, 29th, and it honors. It's supposed to involve mothers of children who have been murdered, but it's involved many, many different organizations. It's a huge march that goes for 8 miles. And it's all about justice and peace and getting rid of gun violence. And so here are some of the quilts by Grandparents for Gun Safety. Of course, these are much more simple than professional quilters, as you can see with the ones you saw before, but still it's making the same point. Again, I know you can't believe that, but that's actually a quilt in the top left-hand corner. Some of the quilting techniques are amazing. The lower left has a quilt panel made by a teen in the Social Justice Sewing Academy, and this is an organization that was started in 2017 by Sarah Trail. She was 11 when Trayvon Martin was killed, and she wanted to go to a march, and her mother wouldn't let her, so instead she decided, because she'd been quilting since she was even younger than 11, so she decided to make a quilt in his memory, and then she went on to get a degree in art, and she runs quilt workshops for teens who are affected in cities where there's a lot of gun violence so that they can express their sorrow at lost friends and a family through that. These are some of the memorials that have been done to the lost. You can see the masked people with carrying the photos of the Sandy Hook's kids who were murdered. Then at a game, T-shirts marking spots where that many kids can't go to the game because they're dead. The top left-hand corner is the actual Sandy Hook Memorial that I visited actually a year ago. And Heeding God's Call is an organization that mounts T-shirts with gun survivors' names on them in different churches around Chester County. This is a memorial I created in 2016, and it's the mugs represent 9 parishioners from Charleston, South Carolina, the plates, the 20 children and adults from Sandy Hook, and the flatware 47 nightclub guests in Orlando, Florida. And it's in memory of those gunned down in schools, clubs, churches, synagogues, concerts, homes, grocery stores, malls, and streets. So, March for Our Lives. This is a really great organization, and if there's anything that you ever want to donate to Leaders We Deserve or March for Our Lives, they're working tirelessly for better gun violence prevention laws. And there you can see some of the participants in the speech. And John Lewis actually did go to that. I was there. I'm somewhere in that crowd, you see. So these comics are illustrating the fact that young people can really make the difference. And you can see Congress being like swept along by the March for Our Lives kids who are going, thoughts and prayers. And then this one, LaPierre, in the top right-hand corner, hiding under the desk with those I love. Here's student protesters getting close, so scared. And then the NRA saying, we have to get the kids back on the couch and in front of their screens. instead of being activists. So support the youth. This is an interesting thing that happened right here in Bucks County. After the Parkland shooting, there were school walkouts, which were encouraged by March for Our Lives. And at the Penn Ridge School, 200 students were served Saturday detention because they staged, well, because they walked out. And then so they staged a quiet protest, linking arms and wearing Parkland victims' names and sitting arms linked for the entire detention. You know what? They can do that. We can do more. Again, Leaders We Deserve, Maxwell Frost. He was a member of the Parkland High School, and he went on. He's now the youngest congressperson who ever was in the House. And there's David Hogg, who started Leaders We Deserve and March for Our Lives. He's still active in that. Emma Gonzalez, who gave the speech that, we call BS. These are just ordinary students who rose to the occasion. So what can we do? All right. The ballot box. Hopefully the pen is mightier than the sword, although these days we really don't know if that's even true. Peace plans, organizations. You can check on goodbyegunstocks.com to see if any of your funds support guns in ways that you don't want to, that you object to. These are different organizations that you can join. I actually belong to Ceasefire PA and Sandy Hook Promise and March for Our Lives, and I think one other, which right now is like so many of them I'm a monthly contributor to. You can see Chris Murphy in the photo. He spoke for 15 hours. He filibustered when Congress would not pass in 2015 better gun violence prevention laws. He's been a tireless worker against gun violence. Mother's Dream Quilt Project, Not One More Quilt. You can register your protest that way. And these, who in your life would have to die from gun violence in order for you to care about gun control? And picture of a dead loved one here. So, if there's a goddess, where do they stand on this issue? Another mass shooting, more dead children and women. Time for more thoughts and prayers. And here comes the image of, of course, Zeus, the thunderbolt striking them dead. Enough of your useless thoughts and prayers, she says. Start banning guns. Mourn the lost and work for the living. A picture is truly worth 1,000 words. This heart is loaded, and I'm not afraid to use it. So we remember them. These are, again, the children. Since I start the slide presentation with talking about Sandy Hook, these are the children again. We remember them, and there's a poem here. If anybody's interested in it, I can send you a copy, but it's written by Sylvan Kamens and Rabbi Jack Reimer, remembering the children. And here I am with my friend Karen at one of the gun violence. She was going to come with me today, but she wasn't feeling well. But those are the Ceasefire PA t-shirts. And orange is the color of the gun violence prevention movement for Ceasefire PA, and it's become a national symbol. There's a gun violence prevention day every year now, and there has been for at least 8 years. And that's because orange is the color that hunters wear to protect themselves. And so orange is now protect kids against gun violence. And that's it. So if you have any questions about either my methods or anything that I know that maybe I could answer, feel free to ask. Yeah.
So I love this. Thank you for coming. This was so cool. As someone who's around conservatives like all the time, basically everyone in my life is a conservative, and I'd say some of them are for guns, some of them aren't. It's kind of hard to tell. This art is beautiful, and I can see a lot of people on the left resonating with it. Do you think that this gets across to people on the right in the way that it's supposed to, or do you think that it has sometimes a tendency to pull the conversation apart?
It's a great question. First of all, I don't show it to unfriendly audiences. The places I've shown it have been churches and organizations like this. I don't actually know much about what affects people on the other side of where I am to care about things. I know that the wisdom out there is if you can connect to something that they actually care about. But until many more, I don't believe I'm saying this and I don't mean it in a way that it should happen, but until many more politicians actually suffer a gun death in their family, you can see what's happened with United Healthcare. It has been this outpouring of people who are furious. Now, that doesn't justify murder. I'm not saying that. But it is causing attention to a huge issue. I just had surgery 2.5 weeks ago, and I have surgery coming up in January, and already my at-home health care was refused, denied by United Healthcare. Now, I'm not going to go murder anybody, but I can understand people's anger. And I don't know that there is anything that will cause them to care about this more than they do, other than knowledge. And a lot of times the people who are so very staunchly, maybe not even conservative, but really far right, they don't care about facts. They don't care about, they're hearing the wrong information, as you know. So I don't know. I don't know what it means. But in my little corner of the world, all I can do is the little bit that I can do to make people more aware of how prevalent the issue is out there, which, how many of you are surprised at how many quilts and satirical comics there are? Yeah, right. So my hope is that this motivates any one of you who are here. Maybe you'll donate to Leaders We Deserve or March for Our Lives, or maybe you'll start writing to your congresspeople. I'm shocked at the number of people that I know who don't, because we've been trying to pass some sensible gun violence prevention laws in Pennsylvania now through Ceasefire PA and other stuff for, I've been involved in it here in Pennsylvania for at least 8 years, 9 years I think now, when I moved here from Connecticut. And the last two really sensible gun violence prevention bills, which were about mental health and ghost guns, failed by 1 vote in the House. 1 vote. And we did all this lobbying and all these, but we can't stop. I mean, we can't just give up and not keep letting our congresspeople know, because they have to, both federal and state, they have to mark down what people care about, what people call in and email and so forth. They have to mark that down. So one of the things that the man, Fritz Walker, who used to lead the local chapter here of Ceasefire PA in the Valley, he's since moved years ago, a couple of years ago, but he always used to say to us, if only we as people who want to see better gun violence prevention laws had as much passion about that as the gun owners have about their rights and their guns, we would make headway.
I agree.
I'd just like to address his question and point out California used to be an open carry state, and Ronald Reagan actually changed that because the Black Panther Party started open carrying weapons to the polls. And in 2016, the presidential candidates, one of them suggested confiscating guns, and it was Donald Trump suggesting going door to door in Chicago to take black people's guns away from them.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that that's helpful, but maybe if more black people had guns, maybe the Republicans would.
Yeah, you probably know the history of the Second Amendment. It actually was put into place mostly to prevent newly enfranchised black people from getting guns.
And the slave patrols.
Yeah, you can read the history on that if you Google it.
I agree.
Yeah. Any other? Yeah.
A few years ago, and maybe as much as 10 years, I don't know, but the NRA was going bankrupt. Wayne LaPierre had all kinds of criminal charges and things. What happened that they are alive again?
Well, they're not actually as powerful and as strong as they used to be. But it's really been taken over by the far right, the MAGA people, and all that. It's so there's a bigger portion of people who are more protective of Second Amendment rights than they are of other things.
but Lapierre, actually, they lost a lot of money, they lost a lot of donors. It found out he was actually skimming a lot of millions of dollars off the top and everything. So once that was revealed, and there became, I think a lot of it had to do with the movements around Parkland and things like that, because the kids got so active in the country. They were registering, I guess it didn't really help this past election, but after
March for Our Lives, the kids didn't just have a march. They were registering, they were going on bus tours around the country. They were going to ghetto neighborhoods because, you know, they were primarily white school and all the kids who were killed were white. So they said, no, look at all the black kids who are being killed. They started taking bus tours to those places, help organizing those. A lot of them were speakers at the March for Our Lives rally. And now they've been able to activate kids to get, actually for the March for Our Lives march, all the kids who were volunteers had on T-shirts with a barcode on it that you could hold your phone up to and register to vote. So they've got some fabulous ideas. That's why I say, I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but supporting the youth is going to be really important as we go forward. So, yeah, anything else? Yeah.
So after you create a quilt, how do you get the message out there?
Well, I didn't create these quilts. These are quilts from the shows that I've gone to, like Guns, Loaded Conversations. The only way I could get the message... Wait a minute. Let me shut this off.
Why don't you put it back on?
Oh, okay.
That's why
I didn't know you were still recording. The only way that I can get the message out is by what I do, like with this, you know, to different organizations. And so the creation of the, I mean, I quilt. I have lots of quilts I've made, but I haven't made quilts of social protest. But I got interested in it when I went to the exhibit at Lowell, which was Threads of Resistance, which is a great title, Threads of Resistance, because all the quilts in that, there were 35 quilts that were juried, and they were all protesting various statements and policies that were going to be, well, that were now in effect. By the time the quilt show was mounted, it was 2017, so Trump was actually, by then, was president. But they put out the call for the jury as soon as he was elected. And that was seen by, you know, probably thousands of people. And I don't know whether it toured or not, but that's basically the message. This is a graphic message to help people to see how many people care about it, quilters and graphic artists. So, but I'm not doing that myself. So, I'm primarily an educator. Quilting is my on the side passion, but I merged the two. You had a question?
I just wanted to say, you know, as you were going through this presentation, like I was kind of at the beginning, I was kind of like, what's this going to be like? It really had a significant cumulative impact as you went through it.
A significant what, sorry?
Cumulative impact.
Yeah.
You know, very, very impactful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Tom?
Yeah, I was just trying to follow up on this man's question about what message works. And I know I was a member of Every Town for Gun Safety. That's the Michael Bloomberg
Right.
organization.
Yep.
It's put in millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I was curious, and Ceasefire too, PA, what is the message that they get out that is more, I would say, moderate, comforting to an electorate or a populace that is really stuck on maintaining the Second Amendment and
Well, it's pretty
what
much
is possible.
it's really countering the propaganda by NRA and other gun rights organizations that there's a slippery slope and that the Democrats or the progressives or liberals are coming for your guns. It's really countering that message by saying no. And that's what we do when we visit lobbyists. I mean, when we as lobbyists visit the politicians, we say we're not coming for, this is not getting rid of the Second Amendment. This is not getting rid of guns. You cannot do that in this country. The other countries that have done it, they don't have a Second Amendment. So they don't have, you don't have a whole bunch of people suing if you do anything at all. So the message that you have to really work on is common sense gun prevention laws, gun violence prevention laws, common sense. And those are things like taking guns away from someone who is a felon, who's been charged as a felon and committed felon. Making sure that people like in abusive relationships who have threatened to kill their spouse, partner, whatever, that they have a temporary restraining order, that they have to turn their guns over, but they can petition to get them back. But the problem is that the other side says any measure, no matter how small, is part of the slippery slope. That's their favorite thing. So you have to keep hammering that away to people, that this is not against the Second Amendment and taking everybody's guns. This is having sensible. And I think the most success that I have had is really with saying, like, hey, my hairdresser every year has to have her license renewed, and because she has scissors, lethal weapon. Car seats, why do you think they were put in? Look at all the children's lives who were saved by car seats. So you have to cite that. You have to put that in the sense of it being a public health epidemic. But then again, because of COVID, we have a different interpretation of what a public health epidemic is, because look at all the people who became COVID deniers, mask deniers, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we've really gotten pretty nutty in a fairly large percentage of our population. I don't know where that's going to go. All I can do is, as I said before, in my little corner of the world, do what I can. I love that saying from the Talmud, and I don't know if I'm going to articulate it correctly, but it's, you are not mandated to do all the work, but neither are you free to avoid some of it. Something like that. That's what I believe. Anyone else? Yeah.
You said you take this presentation into churches, which tend to be on the conservative side.
Not my church. I'm a Unitarian Universalist. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, is there a way to wend your way into that area of,
Yeah, well, this might be a third career for me. I don't know, because after I did high school teaching for 30 years, I was training at the end. I became a counselor, and I've been doing that for 30 years. So this might be a third career for me, but I'll tell you a little story when you talk about churches, because a new friend that I have who I've been teaching quilting, when we met for the second time, she knew about some of my politics, and she said, this might be a game changer. You might not want to be my friend. She said, I'm a gun owner. And I said, why would that make me not want to be your friend? And I said, is it a registered gun? Yes. Do you have safety precautions for it? Yes. Do you believe that there's too much gun violence? Yes. She does target practice. And I said, that's not going to destroy our friendship. I respect the fact that you're a gun owner, and the same thing with the guitar player in my band. I respect that he's a hunter, he has rifles, but he doesn't believe people should have assault weapons. So I think there are some areas of agreement with reasonable people. I mean, something like anywhere from 78 to 90% of the American public, when polled about these issues, would you like to see better background checks, better management of mental health crises with people with guns, tightening laws for background checks, universal background checks, like that. Most of those people say yes. The American public, and by and large, including gun owners, wants to see better gun violence prevention laws. So that's where we have to go. That's really the avenue we have to follow. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that 100% with a lot of different issues. I'm in a climate change lobby, and I just had a conversation with my grandmother yesterday, I guess. And it was so interesting because she's a climate denier, but I think by the end of the conversation she was a lot more open to it because she thought that we want to take people's cars away.
Yeah,
and
right.
We want to shut off all the, all this stuff.
We want to get rid of gas stoves. We want to get, yeah, I know. Yeah.
And same deal with the guns. I can see how a lot of people have a misconception about a movement or about an issue. And I think the first step to connection is the let's get on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
You don't have to see the severity like I see it. you don't have to see the solutions as valid as I see it, but like we both have to acknowledge that there is an issue, and so
Right.
I think that approach is just baseline question. Do you think this?
Yeah.
Do you think that? From there, we can sort of figure it out as we go.
No, and I think your point is really well taken for any of the causes that liberals, progressives, whatever you want to say, care about. And the one-to-one conversations are going to be the ones like you with your grandmother that really matter. All my family is liberal, and in fact, my 16-year-old granddaughter cried herself to sleep the night of the election, but she got up the next morning. Her father said both of them could take mental health days, but she got up and she said, "No, I'm going to school because I don't want those idiot Trump boys to think they won." Well, you know, she's the hope for the future. She's a progressive and an activist already. She's been going around with my daughter, who is a union organizer and union mediator. And, you know, we just have to hope that we don't have to throw in the faces of people the most outrageous solutions, like we're going to take everybody's guns away, but you can have conversations with people about, well, what would be a reasonable, what could we do to help the gun violence prevention? What can we do to help the climate issues? Because I agree with you, that's just very similar. Like this misinformation out there is something that we're battling that was never a part of my life when I was younger. I mean, obviously, I'm 77, you're obviously, you know, much younger. So I can't even imagine really what it will take to get rid of the misinformation, disinformation, and outright lying. Anyone else? Okay, well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate your attentiveness and your questions.